Grief has a way of quieting everything around you. Sounds dull. Time stretches. That's how it felt driving down the foggy coastline toward the tiny village of Larkspur Bay, a place my grandfather had always called the end of the world in the best way. My name is Marcus Bell. I'm 34. I've spent most of my life chasing silence through a lens, photographing snow leopards in the Himalayas, sea lions on Galapagos shores, birds nesting on cliffs with no name. And yet, that drive down into Larkspur Bay felt like the quietest I'd ever known. My grandfather, the man who raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 9, was gone. Just like that. A heart attack in his sleep. Peaceful, they said. I didn't feel peace. I felt hollow. The cottage was exactly as I remembered it. Weathered cedar, green trim faded by sea wind, the porch creaking even before I stepped onto it. Inside, the faint smell of old books, pipe tobacco, and salt air lingered like a memory too stubborn to leave. That first evening, I met Elise. I had driven into town for groceries and ended up outside a small bakery with a chalkboard sign that said, "Fresh sourdough and kindness." The place looked warm. I didn't feel like being warm, but I went in anyway. She was there behind the counter, flower on her apron, sleeves pushed up, hair tied back in a red bandana. Late 30s, maybe. Quiet. When she saw me hesitate, she didn't ask if I needed help. She just nodded once, like she knew why I was there. "You're Henry's grandson," she said, softly. "He talked about you all the time." I nodded. I think I said thank you, but my voice barely made it past my throat. Over the next few weeks, I learned she had been stopping by the cottage to check on my grandfather whenever I was abroad, bringing fresh bread, sometimes soup. No grand gestures, just small things. She didn't ask questions about me, never offered advice or condolences, just showed up. Like grief had taught her the value of sitting in silence with someone else's sorrow. She helped me sort through his belongings, never pushing, just patient. I found myself staying longer in the village than I meant to. Her presence was like an open window in a musty room. I didn't fall in love. Not really. I just mistook the comfort for closeness, the way people do when they're lonely enough. One evening, sitting on the porch, I looked over and said, "I feel like you're the only person who gets it." She smiled a little, but didn't answer. That should have told me everything. It was a quiet Tuesday night, one of those early autumn evenings where the wind outside whispers like it's remembering something. We had just finished dinner. Elise made lentil stew, the kind she cooked when she didn't feel like pretending. The bakery was closed that day, and the radio played soft jazz in the background. We weren't exactly a couple, not in the way other people use that word. But after 2 years of sharing mornings, meals, and a roof, lines blur. We had settled into something steady, muted, familiar, a kind of peace I didn't know how to name. She poured us each a glass of wine and leaned her elbows on the table, her fingers running along the rim of her glass like she was trying to find the right sound. Then she said it, just like that. "We should get married." I blinked. Not out of excitement or shock, just confusion. There was no softness in her voice. No candlelit build-up or romantic moment. It felt like a suggestion. Like maybe she was offering to rearrange the furniture. I didn't answer right away. I watched her. Her face didn't give much away, and maybe that's what made it harder. There was no urgency in her eyes. No fear, either. Just calm. "I mean," she added, "we live together. It might make sense." I looked around the kitchen, the ceramic coffee mugs we used every morning, the pile of mail by the fridge, the 2 plants she kept forgetting to water. This was our life. Simple, steady. And when I thought back to everything that had happened, my grandfather's death, the spiral of silence that followed, and Elise quietly becoming the person who anchored me, I felt something that wasn't quite love but came close enough to touch it. "I don't want to lose this," I said. You've been there for me in a way no one else ever has." She nodded. "Then maybe this is the next step." So I said yes. Not because I was swept off my feet, but because I thought maybe this was what maturity looked like, choosing safety, choosing a person who had already proven they wouldn't leave. We got married the following month. Just the 2 of us, a justice of the peace, and a rainstorm that nearly canceled everything. She wore a pale blue dress and didn't cry. I wore my grandfather's old tie. We both smiled in the photos. But something in me already knew it was the kind of smile people wear when they're trying to believe they've made the right choice. The first few months of marriage didn't feel much different. We still had the same routines, morning coffee, quiet dinners, the occasional Sunday drive up the coast. But something was missing, or maybe it had never really been there. It started small. Elise stopped waiting up when I worked late in the studio. She stopped asking about the photos I was editing. If I showed her something I was proud of, a rare coastal owl I'd captured in flight, the way the morning light hit the cliffs, she'd glance at it and say, "That's nice," before going back to whatever she was doing. Once, I caught myself lingering in the hallway after handing her a cup of tea, hoping she'd look up and say something more. She didn't. It wasn't like she was cruel or cold, just unreachable. Like someone had closed a door behind her, and I wasn't sure when or if it would open again. I tried, at first. I cooked dinner more often, left little notes around the house, simple things like thinking of you or let's walk to the pier tonight. She smiled when she found them, sometimes kissed my cheek, but never brought them up. One night, I asked if she was okay. She blinked like I had asked something out of line. I'm fine, she said. Just tired. The bakery's been hectic. That was always the reason. Tired. Stressed. Busy. Never sad. Never distant. Just neutral. We'd sit across from each other at dinner, the clink of silverware louder than any conversation. I'd try to fill the silence, ask about her day, tell her about mine. She'd nod, respond politely, but never with feeling. Her answers were safe, clean, emotionless. Once, I reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't squeeze back either. It was like touching stone. I told myself she just needed time, that we were adjusting, that not every marriage starts with fireworks. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't new. This was who Elise had always been, and I'd chosen to ignore it. Back when we were just two people sharing grief and empty space, her quiet felt like comfort, like calm. But now, living inside that quiet, it felt like drowning slowly. I started staying out later, not because I had work, but because the stillness at home became unbearable. I took longer assignments, drove farther, shot more sunsets than I needed to. And every time I returned, the lights would be on, dinner might be warm, and Elise would greet me with a soft smile and a kiss on the cheek. But nothing more. I was married to a woman whose walls never came down. And I kept telling myself, maybe next month. Maybe if I just try a little harder. Because that's what love is, right? Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. One morning, over coffee, Elise mentioned she was starting a mindfulness workshop. Just once a week, she said, eyes on the newspaper. They're offering sessions at the community center. Figured it might help with stress. I tried not to show how relieved I felt. She hadn't said much about feeling overwhelmed lately, but I could see it in her tightness around the mouth, shorter answers, long stretches spent staring out the window. If therapy or guided breathing or whatever it was gave her a way back to herself, I was all for it. That's great, I said, genuinely. Want me to go with you? She gave a small shake of her head. No, it's more of a personal thing. Introspective. I nodded, told myself to be supportive. For the first couple weeks, she came home quiet, but not in a bad way. More inward. She didn't offer anything about the sessions, but I didn't want to push. By the fourth or fifth week, I gently asked, how's it going? The workshops. She shrugged. It's fine. Just learning to be present. That was it. No anecdotes. No reflection. Nothing deeper. I started to wonder if she was actually going or just needed a reason to be alone. Do you want to talk about any of it? I asked one evening as we sat on the porch, listening to the wind. She was sipping tea, legs curled under her. Not really, she said, not unkindly. It's more helpful if I keep it internal. I nodded, even though I didn't understand. I was supposed to be her partner, her husband. And yet, everything meaningful felt locked away behind polite smiles and soft deflections. Once, I asked if she wanted company on the walk to the center. Thanks, she said, but I like going alone. It felt like another door quietly closing. At night, I'd lay beside her, eyes open, listening to her breathing, wondering if she felt any of what I felt. Loneliness that didn't come from absence, but from being next to someone who never really let you in. I tried writing her a letter once, just a simple note telling her I missed her, even when she was sitting beside me. I never gave it to her. What would be the point? She would just smile, thank me, and fold it neatly into a drawer like it was a receipt. The distance wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow and soft and quiet. Like erosion. It was a gray afternoon in early spring, the kind that smells like wet soil and ocean salt. I had been out on a shoot nearby. A flock of sandpipers had returned early, darting between the tide like dancers, and I was planning to stay longer. But the rain rolled in fast, thick and drenching, and I decided to call it a day. When I pulled into the driveway, Elise's car was already there. I figured she had skipped the workshop. Maybe she wasn't feeling well. The house was quiet except for faint music coming from the back, the old greenhouse that my grandfather had converted into a sitting room. She liked to go out there sometimes in the late afternoons when the sun hit the glass just right. As I got closer, I heard laughter. A woman's voice, Clara, I realized, Elise's oldest friend. They were sipping something from mason jars and leaning into each other like they hadn't laughed in weeks. I paused outside the slightly open door. Not to snoop, at least that's what I told myself, but because it had been so long since I heard Elise sound that alive. He's gentle, Elise was saying, between laughs. Safe. Like a warm coat you put on when the weather turns. Safe is good, Clara said, with a smile in her voice. But it's not, love, Elise said quietly. Not the way I thought I'd feel when I finally got married. My stomach nodded, but I stayed frozen. Elise kept going, her voice soft but clear. He was grieving when we met. I was lonely. It felt necessary, like two people standing in the same shadow. Do you regret it? Clara asked. There was a pause. Then Elise said, I think I married him because I didn't want to be alone, not because I couldn't live without him. That one sentence sank into me like a stone. I thought maybe it would grow into something deeper, she added. But it hasn't. He's a good man. He deserves someone who doesn't just settle. Clara didn't respond. Just the sound of the rain ticking against the glass. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. My shoes squelched slightly in the mud as I returned to the house, and suddenly every sound in the world felt too loud. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. All those nights I thought she was just tired. All those one-word answers, those closed doors, those long silences I had filled with my own hope. She didn't love me. She never had. I was a soft landing. A safe bet. The person you pick when you're too tired to keep waiting for the spark. Back inside, the house felt like a museum of things I had misread. The photos, the mugs, the folded blankets on the couch. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the salt shaker, blinking hard. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. There was only this dull, cold clarity. I wasn't her choice. I was her shelter. I didn't sleep that night. Elise came in from the greenhouse just before sunset, cheeks pink from the chill and still smiling faintly from whatever she and Clara had shared out there. I watched her move through the kitchen, set down her jar, rinse her hands, check the oven like it was any other Thursday. I couldn't look at her the same way. She didn't know I had heard. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to fight. I didn't even want to ask why. Instead, I stood up, walked out the back door, and climbed the narrow staircase above the garage to my studio. I closed the door and locked it behind me. I had never done that before, not in 2 years. It felt final. Quietly final. The light outside faded into that bluish twilight that always made this part of the coast feel dreamlike. I sat on the old wooden stool by the window and let the silence thicken. The hum of the small space heater. The creak of wind against the glass. My own breath. She knocked the first time just after 9. Marcus. Her voice was soft. Did something happen? I didn't answer. She knocked again, firmer this time. Did you get hurt or? Marcus, please say something. I stood and walked to the door but didn't unlock it. I couldn't. If I saw her face, I knew I'd crumble. After a long pause, her voice came again, lower now. I don't understand. Talk to me. Still, I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Not when the truth was already out. Eventually, I heard her footsteps retreat down the stairs. My phone rang an hour later. Her name on the screen. I let it ring out. Then it rang again. This time, I answered. Elise, I said, my voice flat. Oh, thank God. Marcus, what's going on? I just need space, I said. Please don't come up here. Can we just? I said I need space. I hung up before she could respond. The rest of the night passed slowly. I sat on the floor, surrounded by contact sheets and old negatives, images of animals I had chased across the world. Some of them looking right into the lens like they knew something I didn't. That small room became something else, a place of reckoning, of truth. I thought about how easily I'd confused stillness with intimacy, how I'd accepted crumbs of affection and called it love. The lock on the door wasn't just about space. It was a line, a boundary I had never drawn before. And once it was there, I realized how long it should have been. The next morning, I woke early, before the birds, before the village stirred, before I could second-guess myself. The sky was the pale gray of half-frozen milk, soft and cold, and the only sound was the creak of the studio floorboards as I moved around gathering my things. Elise was still asleep when I slipped into the house. I moved quietly, almost reverently, as if the walls themselves might protest. I packed only the essentials, camera gear, a week's worth of clothes, my grandfather's compass, and an old photo of the two of us fishing off the Larkspur Pier. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. It looked too bright against the scratch wood, like something pretending to belong. I paused for a moment before heading out. I didn't feel anger, just a clean, aching certainty. By the time Elise stirred awake, I was already miles up the coast. I drove until I reached the edge of a forest preserve where my grandfather used to take me when I was a kid. He always said the trees out here had a different kind of silence, not empty, but sacred. The place hadn't changed much. The same log cabin nestled between the pines, a wood-burning stove in the corner, the smell of damp moss and cedar. I checked in, dropped my bags, and stood outside for a long time, breathing in the stillness. The ache in my chest hadn't gone away, but out here it didn't feel so sharp. Just something I was learning to carry. That afternoon, I called my editor. Can we push back my next few assignments? I asked. There was a pause on the other end. Sure. Everything okay? I just need some time, I said. Next, I called a solicitor in town. A friend of my grandfather's who had handled simple wills and property matters for decades. I'd like to start divorce proceedings, I told him. As soon as possible. He didn't ask why. Just said he'd be in touch with the paperwork. That evening, Elise called. Her name lit up my screen again and again. On the third try, I picked up. Marcus. Her voice cracked. I'm not coming back, I said quietly. I won't be someone's safety net, or backup plan, or placeholder. She was silent for a long time. Then finally, so that's it. No. This is the beginning, I said, of something real. For both of us, hopefully. She started to say my name again, but I ended the call. I stood outside the cabin after that, letting the cold air bite at my skin. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called into the fading light. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I was finally walking toward myself. The divorce moved quickly. No property battles, no shared finances, no custody arrangements. Just 2 names on a document, untangling quietly. Clean. Cold. Elise signed the papers without protest. I received the final notice from the solicitor 3 weeks later in a plain envelope with no return address. I opened it sitting on the cabin porch, a mug of black coffee in my hands, the forest humming with late spring sounds. I didn't cry. I didn't smile, either. Just stared at the page, feeling something close to peace. Word got around, as it always does in towns like Larkspur Bay. Mutual friends reached out. Some with concern, some with awkward well wishes. Clara sent a short message. I didn't know you heard that day. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Elise, though, didn't vanish. A week after the papers were signed, she sent a text. I'm still going to therapy. I'm trying to grow. I hope someday we can talk. I stared at it for a long time. She meant it, I think. But meaning it wasn't the same as changing. I wrote back. I wish you well, but I can't be part of your healing. That has to be yours. After that, she'd reach out every so often. A forwarded article about nature photography. A photo of the bread I used to like. Short messages ending in ellipses, like they were afraid to ask for too much. I always responded politely, but briefly. No warmth. No opening. Meanwhile, I began putting together the plans for something I hadn't done in years, a solo expedition. Patagonia this time. Big skies. Rare birds. Miles between myself and anyone who expected something from me. Before leaving, I returned to the cottage one last time. I didn't go inside. Just walked the perimeter, touching the railings my grandfather once painted, nodding at the old tree we used to sit under in summer. I left the key under the flower pot on the porch and texted the landlord to say I wouldn't be renewing. That night, I deleted the shared photo archive Elise and I had kept. Hundreds of small, ordinary pictures, sourdough loaves, overcast beach walks, coffee mugs, her reading in bed. None of them lies. But none of them the whole truth either. With one click, they were gone. I boarded my flight the next morning, window seat, camera bag tucked under the seat in front of me. Somewhere over the clouds, I looked out and felt light. Not happy. Not sad. Just free. Elise once told me I brought calm into her room. I think now she meant stillness. A silence she could fill with whatever she needed. But I'm done being the backdrop to someone else's life. I'm going to live mine. And this time, I'll take the pictures for myself.